All right, so next up for your Aggies is Colorado. We haven't played them in about a decade now, so let's find out what the Buffaloes have been up to. All right, so let's take a look at some film, see how they play, and then look at some position breakdowns. So this is their offensive line. I've got it highlighted so that you can see who their starters are. So just match this up with their depth chart. As you can see, they have some decent size on the offensive line. 310, 340, 305, 295, 290. But if you go on over to um, their rating, you're going to notice one guy, 0.79, another guy not rated 0.80, 0.82. So these are on the low end of the 3-star range. Let's contrast with what they're going to be going up against with our defensive line. Okay, so now contrast that with our defensive line, and it is confirmed Clemens will be back. Whether or not he actually starts the game off is maybe still unclear, but you got him, Darius Jones, DeMarvin Leal, and Jaden Peavy. Peavy's 315, Leal is 290, Jones 300, and Clemens is 270. Keep this in mind when we take a look at their defensive line, how this kind of looks compared to what they have. You've got Clemens. He was a 3-star recruit, so was a Darius Jones. Arguably, they're playing, on the high side of that, maybe as 4 stars. Of course, Leal is a 5-star, and Peavy was maybe on the low side 4-star, but quite a bit more talent that they're going to be going up against than they did when they played Northern Colorado. All right, so now let's take a look at their defensive line, and they kind of run more of a 3-down front, and they use a linebacker to come down as a defensive end a lot of times, usually I think standing up. So these are their 3 starters right here, Lane, Rodman, and Sammy. Decent size on them, 285, 300, 325. Weight-wise, it looks like they're going to be there, right? But, you're looking at Sammy, he's a 2-star recruit. The other 2 were 3 stars, kind of in the middle to low range. They're going to be going up against our offensive line, as you'll see here in just a little bit, quite a bit of a mismatch. But now thinking back to what we're going to be fielding, with Leal, Peavy, Clemens, even Shamar Turner maybe going to be coming in quite a bit more this next game. I don't think we're going to see McKinley Jackson back just yet, but we're all talking about, mid .95 type of guys. Shamar Turner on the high side of that. So pretty stark difference between what they're going to be putting out there against us and what we will be. So a bit of a surprise last time we saw Bryce Foster starting in the center. Kenyon Green and Jameer Robinson on the bookends, what we kind of thought was going to take place. Aggie had a good chance of making it in there, and he did. Layden Robinson, of course, there as well. So, in the center, we've got, a real high-end 4-star Foster, right bookend, Green, a 5-star guy, Jameer Johnson, a real high-quality 3-star on the left side, Aki, a 4-star, and Layden Robinson, who we know is, he's maybe a 3-star, but man, he's not playing like it, honestly. He's been playing the last year like, he's at least a 4-star. So look at the size differential, too, between their defensive line and our offensive line. I think this is going to be an obvious mismatch, and I showed these 2 areas in particular because I think this is what's going to make a lot of the big difference between us and them this Saturday. The only other thing I do want to talk about a little bit later is the quarterback spot, but we'll get to that a little bit more in a bit. And so Colorado is coached by Carl Rovell, and this is going to be his 2nd year there. He comes from, as recently, the Miami Dolphins. Last year was his 1st year. Here's what they did last year. They went 4 wins, 2 losses, right? We know they had the loss to Texas in the Alamo Bowl. and they lost to Utah after having gone 4 in a row, beating Arizona, San Diego, Arizona State. I'm sorry, Arizona State was canceled, but Stanford and UCLA. So they beat some teams that have been doing better as of recently. I mean, UCLA this year and last year is completely different, but had a pretty good season. Maybe one that we wouldn't have expected, and then maybe didn't do their best work towards the end of the season. Now, I would not have thought this without having looked to see that in the last 9 matchups, we've only won 3. I would have thought this would have been flip-flop. So they own the series 6-3 right now, having won as recently as 2009 and going all the way back to 1995. And we just took that L last time we played them. So I'm really looking forward to getting that back and righting the ship. And so if we're going to right that ship, here's kind of what I see is where we need to look to maybe exploit this and know what we're going to be up against. Third down percentage, we're both kind of in the same neck of the woods. We were first, though, this last week in third down percentage. They were 15th. Pass yards allowed, we were 15th with 7.8. They were 76th with 9.8. Rushing offense, we were 14th and they were 17th. So we were getting 7.2 per play on the ground, and they were getting 5.7. Keep in mind that's against Northern Colorado. That is an FCS team. Big disparity here in the turnover column is we had 4 and they had 0, right? So this is probably the biggest concern with how we're going to do, the result that's going to be gotten on the field. Can we clean up those turnovers? Can we force some? We had, I think, 2? Both by O'Neal. Colorado didn't give up any this last week. So if we can drop that down and then get a couple others, the result could get pretty interesting. Rush yards, we did about the same, 303 for us, 281 for them. Pass was a bit of a disparity, 292 for us. So Haynes King had just under that 300-yard mark, and their guy only had 102. Rushing was interesting. We had 226. Pardon me, rushing allowed. We allowed 226. That's not been typical of us. This worries me. They only gave up 20, but I give that mostly to Northern Colorado being just so pass heavy. We allowed only 110 through the air as to their 236. So I think there's a huge mismatch right there that we can exploit. I think we're going to eat all day long on the passing game. Quite frankly, I think it's going to happen with rushing as well. I think that was the strength of our offensive line this last week was rushing. I think they'll do a lot of the same here, especially as you saw the mismatch between our offensive line and their defensive line. I just think that's going to be way too much for them to handle. That's going to, in turn, open up the passing game even more. Question is whether or not we're going to have any long drives and then those end up in a turnover, because that's really what made Saturday's game just look not necessarily awful, but kept me from thinking that it was just an amazing first outing. So the real question for me is whether or not we're going to have the turnovers this Saturday. We don't have those turnovers against Kent State, and we put 14, maybe 21 more points up on the board, and we have a completely different feeling about what that game was. Right now, my feeling was I thought we could have performed much better, right? But that's because we had the 4 turnovers. We can't guarantee that we're going to get turnovers from our defense this go around, so I'm kind of thinking I've got this game right about in the 14-point margin for victory for us. But I can easily see this actually getting up to like 30 really quick. If Haynes King plays a clean game, I mean, he passed for nearly 300 against Kent State. I think the matchup's even worse this go around for Colorado. And I think he could really exploit what they're going to have out there. Our offensive line is going to, in my opinion, eat them alive on the ground game, which is should open up the passing game even more. But I think he's going to play much cleaner. He looks very capable. So I really expect him to put up a similar performance as he did against Kent State, except without the turnovers. Who knows? Maybe he still does. But if he does that, and I think he will, I'm taking the over. So Ags are going to cover this 17, and we're going to beat the hell out of Colorado.